In this video, you are going to see children who miraculously survived a plane crash, earthquakes, illnesses, and so much more, starting off with a toddler that got trapped in a well and working our way up to some of the craziest events that children have survived. Let's get started with number 15, toddler trapped in the well. A 4-year-old boy named Gabe Aberton and his grandmother were in the yard when suddenly the toddler went missing. Worried grandmother promptly sought help from authorities and the search began. According to the officials, the boy went missing during the afternoon, and the emergency workers began searching the nook and corners to find the boy. He was then found trapped in a well at 23 feet below ground in an 18-inch broad hole. The boy's dog had been missing for a week, and it's perceived that the child must have heard the dog barking and eventually fell into them while trying to find him. The emergency workers in Mississippi spent hours rescuing the boy from the deep hole by putting in ropes. As he didn't grab the rope, the workers made a seat out of the string and put it into the well filled with weeds. After working on it for above 3 hours, the bruised and frightened toddler was miraculously rescued and lifted to safety with his missing dog. The boy stuck in the overgrown weeds with his dog was raised 5 minutes past 8 at night. Moving on to number 14, plane crash survived teen. Autumn Veach, a 16-year-old teen, and her grandparents were on a trip from Montana to Washington in their private plane. The plane caught fire and eventually crashed in a forest in Washington. Veach was the sole survivor of the crash and spent 2 days without food and water in the woods. The confused and hurt teen hiked through the treacherous Cascade Mountains and was found by a motorist in the process. She then received treatment from a hospital nearby and miraculously didn't have any serious injury. However, she suffered from bruises and second-degree burns on her right hand when she tried to rescue her grandfather from the burning wreckage. But her grandparents were trapped and she had to escape before blasting. Leland, her grandfather, controlled the plane but surrendered to death along with his wife, Sharon Bowman. The survived teen said the accident was caused due to poor weather conditions and they couldn't see the route. Moving on to number 13, buried alive by an earthquake. Many citizens lost their lives in the disastrous earthquake that took place in Nepal a few years back. The quake left the city in wrecks, but a 15-year-old teenager, Pemba Tamang, was pulled out from the rubbles who miraculously survived under the impacts for 5 days. The teenager was covered in dust and was bruised, but didn't have any life-threatening injury. Along with the American Disaster Response Team, native citizens joined to support the rescue operation, and it took several hours to pull out the boy. The boy made voices from the rubble and was found luckily by some Nepalese rescuers. They then climbed to the top of the Hilton Hotel Rex and tried to figure out the exact location. The child was unbelievably optimistic and responded to the team actively, even though he was jammed between the concrete slabs. The group then used a jack to lift the slabs and raised him. If surviving for 5 days without food or water is not considered a miracle, what could be? Moving on to number 12, a baby survives snowy fight. A 2-year-old boy named Adam in Poland spent a night in the woods during the harsh winter after sneaking out from his grandmother's house in the village north of Krakow, known as Recis. The kid was then found lying near the river in the freezing weather and was only wearing pajamas. Due to hypothermia, the kid fell into an induced coma and took several weeks to recover. When he was brought to the emergency room, he had weak heartbeats. The grandmother didn't notice the kid leaving the house, and the toddler got caught in the woods. During the time, the temperature in the village was -7 degrees Celsius, and the baby's body temperature was 12 degrees Celsius. After a few days, he began moving his hands and started blinking. Moving on to number 11, teen fights flesh-eating bacteria. A 13-year-old boy, Trey Lauren in Seattle, was diagnosed with a flesh-eating bacteria infection. Lauren was infected with the bacteria when he got a cut on his leg with a nail. The patient was initially treated and had 6 stitches. After 5 hours, he experienced severe inflammation in the area and looked like an inflated balloon. After taking MRI, the doctors concluded that the aggressive bacteria is eating him alive. Doctors said that he only has 12 hours before losing his leg and may even lose life in 2 days. In the Seattle Children's Hospital, the boy underwent 13 surgeries, miraculously fought the infection, and recovered entirely without losing his leg. He is considered one of the luckiest people to fend off the deadly disease. Moving on to number 10, baby pulled from building wrecks. The 4-month-old baby Sona Nawal was found 22 hours after getting stuck between the wrecks during the Nepal earthquake, which hit 7.8 on the seismograph. The baby was left with his 9-year-old sister at home alone. When the earthquake struck the city, the girl escaped the effect of the earthquake and was not hurt. But Sona Nawal was trapped under the heavy wooden beam. When the baby was rescued, he was covered with concrete dust and had only a small cut on his brows. It took the rescue team, which included the army, 22 long hours to get the toddler out of his collapsed home unscathed. Moving on to number 9, 18-month-old survives car crash. 18-month-old baby Lily Grossbeck survived a nasty accident where the car crashed into the Utah River. The baby and her mother, Lynn Jennifer, were the passengers, and the mother died on the spot due to the impact. Lily was caught up in the upside-down car for almost 14 hours, submerged partly in the Spanish Fork River. Despite surviving the accident unbelievably, the kid underwent a miraculous recovery, according to the doctors. The car hit a barrier and plummeted into the river. The kid spent more than a half a day in the car with his dead mother until spotted by a fisherman. When brought into the hospital, she was in critical condition. Moving on to number 8, Rose beats leukemia. The 12-year-old girl Rose McGrath from Detroit City fought a cancer battle after getting diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia in 2012. The girl stayed positive for 3 years during her leukemia treatment and had to go through rough patches several times. After making a miraculous or impossible recovery in 2015, she was dismissed from her school due to missed classes during the treatment. Although she battled and won over the disease, she had to face the next difficult phase. Despite the unexpected blow, the girl never loses her hope. Eventually, her family decided to move legally and was taken back into the school after the battle. Moving on to number 7, 6-year-old fights alligator. The 6-year-old brave boy, Joey Welsh, was seized by an alligator during his day off with his father, Welsh. The courageous boy Joey was with his father at the wildlife refuge in Florida, where he wished to take a canoe ride. As the duo was waiting in a line to rent the canoe and the water under the boat caught Joey's attention, he thought that the water was solid ground and tried to stand on the floating plant leaf and ultimately fell into the river. An 8-foot-long alligator then caught him by the right hand, and the kid began to scream. Frightened father tried punching the alligator to free his son, but it was in vain. The wildlife service team then had to kill the animal to free the boy. He survived miraculously with only a few bruises on his right hand. Moving on to number 6, survivor of a parachute failure. A 16-year-old girl, Mackenzie Wethington, was quite excited to go for a skydive as part of celebrating her 16th birthday. In January 2014, she and her father took a skydiving outing to Oklahoma. After her father leaped, she followed, but the parachute didn't open. The girl then plummeted to the ground from 3,500 feet height and survived the fall despite the size. She has broken bones and was internally injured. It was her first attempt and would have been the last given the situation. The helpless father had to watch his daughter spiraling out of control with a failed primary parachute, and only the second parachute was open. Doctors called her a miracle child for withstanding the accident and recovering at a fast rate. To survive a parachute failure is extremely difficult, and she believes that God caught her. Moving on to number 5, Cody the Miracle Kid. Tina and Mike were confused when they found their kid Cody had a particular condition and his leg wouldn't straighten out. The boy was diagnosed with an incurable disease, and doctors predicted that he only had a day to live. The heartbroken parents had to get prepared to mourn the loss of their beloved child. But the kid survived the impossible. Cody then had to undergo surgery to get his legs amputated when he was 15 months old. After the surgery, he was fixed with prosthetics and began therapy. Cody can now even run and is indeed a miracle kid. He was diagnosed with a single vocal cord, and doctors concluded that he wouldn't talk, but he did speak. He even joined the swim team and wished to attend the Olympics. Cody has a positive mindset and tackles any difficulty when he puts his mind into it entirely. Moving on to number 4, hurricane survivor. When Donald was 12 years old, he faced one of the most destructive disasters in American history, Hurricane Katrina. When his home was flooded with water, he got on top of a refrigerator. With each passing moment, the water level rose, and the violent winds broke the windows. He and his mother did not know how to swim and began panicking. His mom then lost control and drowned in front of his eyes, and he stood there helpless. Experiencing the tragic death of his mother, he thought about ending his life. He then tried to get drowned, and suddenly a window broke, and he escaped the impossible and climbed up the roof of the house. And he spent the next 13 hours on the top feeling disheartened. At the ceiling, a young man accompanied Donald, and they both waited for the rescue team to come and get them out of the chaos. Moving on to number 3, girl battles mermaid syndrome. The cheerful girl Milagros was diagnosed with a rare genetic disease known as seronemelia or mermaid syndrome by birth. The girl did not have any external genitalia, and the legs were fused. In most cases, kids with mermaid syndrome surrendered to death during childbirth or before the birth in the womb. Her parents, Ricardo and Sarah, were terrified when they saw the newborn and believed they were cursed. But the couple decided not to give up and do whatever possible to save their little princess. They named her Milagros, which means miracles in Spanish. The doctors then said the kid would not live longer if she were not subjected to a leg-separating surgery. After performing a 5-hour-long surgery, the kid survived the rarest and challenging operation. The doctors were unsure if Milagros would walk, but she indeed tackled the odds and can even dance now. Moving on to number 2, the challenging trisomy battle. When Elliot was in his mother's womb, he was found to have a rare genetic disorder known as trisomy 18. Elliot's parents, Matt and Ginny, have been eagerly awaiting for the arrival of their baby and were shocked by the news, which was detected 2 months before the delivery. The doctors concluded the survival rate was a higher law, and the parents wished it wasn't. Despite the odds, Elliot was born. The lifespan for a baby with trisomy 18 is 15 days, but she seemed determined to tackle the odds. She withstood the battle for 99 days, and the parents took photos and videos of their precious baby all those days. For a baby who was supposed to die before birth and who only had 15 days to live, he stayed with his loving parents for quite some time, filling them with precious memories. Moving on to number 1, miracle twins. Kendra and Malaya Heron are widely known as miracle twins. The twins born to Oprah were conjoined and shared a single intestine, bladder, liver, and single kidney. They had a single leg. The doctor said that the survival rate of the twins is meager, but the duo even learned to crawl, breaking all the predictions. As they grew, the parents had to face the next hurdle. If both of them continued to depend on a single kidney, it would eventually fail, and both of them would be under a fatal condition. The doctors decided to operate on the 4-year-old conjoined twins to separate them, and the surgery lasted for 26 hours. The twins tackled the odds and were separated successfully. One of the twins received a kidney from their mother, and they even had to go to schools now, and soon will be able to experience a much better phase after fixing the prosthetic legs. What do you have to say about these incidents? Let us know in the comments below. Subscribe and we'll see you in the next episode of Stay Wise.